No,
no,
65.
Oh, okay. We're not going to get through this. Okay, this is kind of Howard by the numbers. These are figures he gave me, and I've not had time to check them out. But anyway, he claims to have photographs in 36 museums in the United States. I don't doubt that. Also, 5 museums in Europe he's got photographs. He's had 34 solo exhibits in the United States and 4 overseas. He's got 23 limited edition portfolios that the U of M has a complete set of, and so does Syracuse University. About how many photographs in each portfolio, Howard?
Usually 10.
10? Okay. He received Michigan Council from the Michigan Council of the Arts, creative artist. Can't read my own writing. You know, you get the tremors. In 1985, he got a grant from Michigan. He's got a BS in music, an MA in music, and an MS in mathematics. I know he's taught music. I think he was a band conductor in
Yeah.
Blissfield.
Yeah.
Taught mathematics, and you were a computer programmer for a while.
Yeah, 18 years.
Okay.
But this, you could have read it from here.
Well, now's a great time. Well, I know you brought something to read, so why don't you go ahead and read it.
He was also a composer.
Okay.
Well, small time. Well, I have a little piece here that tells something about my relationship with the club. First of all, I'm 92, and I began photographing and processing at age 14. I photographed my sister's wedding with a 9 by 12 centimeter Zeiss camera in November of my senior year in high school. When a local photographer saw the results, he asked me to come to work for him the rest of my senior year and summers during college. With the help of his discount, I was finally able to buy the 4x5 speed graphic that I had dreamed of for 3 years. And as you've already heard, I joined the club around 1965. Sorry, I don't know the exact date. The 4x5, my 4x5 negatives, and later 5x7, 8x10, and 11x14 gave my prints an advantage over those of most other members who used 35 millimeter film. Because the club was affiliated with the Photographic Society of America, PSA, we had competition at each meeting. The prints had to be 16 by 20 because the judges were seated far away, and they had to be too dark because they were judged under too much light, and so that made them too dark for the walls of their living room. I was the leader of a rebel group that persuaded the club to stop being a member of PSA. It was a relief to be able to pick up prints at meetings and examine them carefully, and members started bringing things as exotic as 4x5 platinum prints. You know, they wouldn't do much where you needed a 16 by 20. Ansel Adams and I became acquainted during 3 workshops in the 1960s and 70s. Thereafter, whenever I was in California, I would call and ask him if he would like to see my latest prints. He was very kind to workshoppers. He always said, come over at 5 o'clock, and he gave me a private print critique, typically. I typically spent the day with Brett Weston, either photographing or choosing prints from his vault to buy. When I stopped collecting in the 1970s, I donated 200 of Brett's prints and 2,500 19th century prints to the Toledo and U of M museums. 65 Adams prints passed through our house, a few at a time, starting when they weren't terribly expensive. But I was very pleased to own sequentially 65 of them. Then you can really enjoy them. So before I attended the Ansel Adams Yosemite workshop, I read the first edition of his book, The Negative, which explains the zone system for controlling negative making. At the workshop, we practiced applying it. Afterwards, I immediately started teaching the camera club about the zone system. I think I remember clearly that it was probably the very next meeting, but anyway, they had a chance to get pretty sick of hearing my voice. And I consider the zone system almost essential for serious black and white work with conventional materials. The programs I gave at the Camera Club evolved into a busy schedule of workshops, first printing and later zone system, view camera, and unsharp masking. The most productive gallery I was in was Camera Obscura in Denver, owned by Hal Gould, who promoted me tirelessly. I taught printing workshops at the Pro Lab in Denver for 20 years, and Hal recruited the students. Sometimes so many we had to have 2 sessions. Afterward, it was a 3.5-hour drive south to get to Great Sand Dunes National Park, which has 55 square miles of the highest dunes in the U.S., fertile territory for workshops and photographing. I wrote 100 articles in 24 years as a contributing editor to Photo Techniques magazine, which made me known to their subscribers all over the world. Many came to my workshops and bought prints. They came from every continent except Australia and Antarctica. I never understood why nobody came from Antarctica. Anyway, and every state except Delaware and Mississippi. No photographers allowed in Mississippi, I guess. Anyway, I cherish the many friends I first met at my workshops. I was thrilled to meet the great photography historian Helmut Gernsheim in the 1980s, and he was very good to me. He entertained me in his home in Switzerland, bought 37 of my prints, gave me a nice statement for the dust jacket of my Greek book, and mentioned me in a new edition of one of his books. He had collected 35,000 19th century photographs before starting to collect 20th century. A few years ago, a German museum mounted an exhibition of 250 prints chosen from both collections, and my photograph called Window Sifnos, Greece was among them. The catalog of the show was titled The Birth of Photography. I thought that was kind of ostentatious. But anyway, I have a copy of the book. Now, Dick Dokas is here tonight with the white mask on. Yeah.
There's a lot of white men.
Oh, there are. Okay. Anyway, Dick and I went photographing 1 or 2 trips per year together for many years, and he helped me teach my Lake Superior workshops. I have to introduce him because he's going to appear in the next paragraph. Morley Bear, that's a good name to remember. Morley Bear was a West Coast photographer who helped with the annual Ansel Adams Yosemite workshop, and his full beard was similar to the one worn by Adams. One morning during a workshop attended by Dick, Morley was having breakfast in the hotel dining room surrounded by students. A tourist, wanting a photograph of the master among his students, found that a small table for 2 was in his way, so he asked the elderly couple seated there to move. So barely able to contain their laughter, Ansel and Virginia picked up their coffee cups and moved, and the tourist got his picture of Morley. That's it.
Does anybody have any questions they'd like to ask Howard? Just keep it brief. But go ahead.
He also has 6 photos in the Library of Congress, so if you're ever there, which is a wonderful place to go, they'll bring everybody's photographs out, you can sit there and look at them. But anyway, Howard has 6 of those there as well.
I didn't know that.
Let's go look at it. Anybody else? Okay, Howard, you brought about a half dozen photographs.
I think I brought 12.
12?
And I would like to go home with 12.
Oh,
I don't know how we'll tell which are which.
wow. Are there any that you'd like to talk about that we could get up here and?
Well, there is a picture of the row of trees in the fog
Yes.
in West Park. When they're not there anymore, but one day I was headed to work, and I thought I better get that picture because it's a nice foggy day, and you need the fog to hide the band shell, and so
Band shell.
well you could put an orchestra in it. Anyway, so I didn't go to work. That was a good move, even if I'd have gotten fired, because later I had to set a limit on how many prints would be made, and just then they published the fact that Adams estimated that at that point he had made about 900 copies of his most popular picture, and so I thought I ought to be allowed half that many. so I made my limit 450 on that one, never dreaming that I would sell that many. But finally, I gave the last one to the Toledo Museum of Art. So that picture kind of went all over.
I tried to duplicate this.
What's that?
It's on my wall.
Yeah. Well, it's on a lot of walls.
I tried to get a copy, or I tried to take this picture and learned that the trees have been cut down. Very disappointed. Any other pictures you want to talk about, Howard? You got quite a few here.
Well, I don't know if I can remember which of mine are here.
Oh, well, why don't you talk about this?
Howard, question for you. You seem to have a really great knack for shapes. How do you build up that?
I don't know.
Oh.
This is
Yeah, you You've got a story about this.
This one is this print doesn't have any dark tones in it. And I had never shown a picture that blacked one end of the scale. So I was a little surprised when that turned out to be the best seller among the Greek pictures. So don't be afraid to leave off one end of the scale if you have a nice subject.
You know, in Photoshop, you could probably put a couple of black cats in there.
Yeah.
One walking down the steps.
Where is that, Howard? Where is that?
That's on Cephnos, and it's a very noticeable church with those irregular steps leading up to the roof. I suppose, I don't know what they did on the roof, but anyway, they could get up there.
Okay, just a couple more, Howard.
Uh,
You spent quite a lot of time photographing churches.
Yeah, I did 16, I think I did 16 cathedrals. I was with Dick on a lot of them, and these were spread over 25 years, and so I had many trips to do cathedrals. And this one, this is the one where you can see the floor. This is the only picture of a cathedral I had ever made where you could see the floor, because there were always people there. And I don't know why there was no one there on that day, but I appreciated it.
Do you remember which church or cathedral it is?
Which one that is?
Yeah.
It probably tells on the back.
It's Lincoln.
I don't see it.
It's Lincoln.
I think it's Lincoln.
Yes, it is.
It's the one right up there on the border with Scotland.
Okay, how about one completely different?
I had a period of time when I was photographing in junkyards and did a lot of pictures that were sort of abstract. And this one I like about it the most of any. I don't know what there is to say about it. Anyway, this junkyard had about 2 or 3 cars that were nicely painted with designs, and so you could get up close and do a part of one of the designs.
What is that, water?
No,
That's a car.
So what side of a car?
it's the design.
It's the detail.
Yeah, the car.
It was a junk car.
Okay, one last one I'd like you to talk about, Howard. And then we'll get the other focus.
Oh, that's a good one.
You're talking about. Oh,
This one I took off the wall of my apartment, and this is really unusual that you can have the white rose that white and still there's detail everywhere in it. And that happened because I printed it with an Unsharp Mask. The Unsharp Mask gives you a little bit better contrast in the very lightest and darkest things. And so I'm very pleased with that. It's an example of where you could get a lot of good out of the Unsharp Mask. But it's a lot of work. Anybody who's doing digital, of course, can just push a button, and I don't know if it gets you exactly the same results. Dick is shaking his head no. And so he does Unsharp Masks too, and I taught workshops on that for a few years. So I don't know how many people have continued. John Sexton began to mention Unsharp Masks in his printing workshops, but I have no idea if he still does or not.
Can you give a brief description of what is involved with that?
What?
Can you give a brief description on what's involved with the Unsharp Mask?
You have to make a film positive. So you contact print the negative on a piece of film with a skimpy exposure and skimpy development. So you have a low contrast positive on film, and then you put that in register with your negative, and it reduces the density range of the negative, because wherever the negative is nearly clear, the mask has its maximum density, and so that's what you do. And it's a terrible job to do that. If you come back from a trip and you have 10 or 15 prints you want to make carefully, you got to make math, and it's a big chore. But we don't know what the Unsharp Mask button on Photoshop does. Have you done an experiment, Dick?
Problem is, in Photoshop, you don't get the expansion that you do in the midtones with the film. It just basically looks like you turn the lights on, and it's incredibly. I mean, it's amazing the amount of extra detail and that you see with not the two ends of the scale, but everything in between. Pretty amazing.
Okay, if you want to be amazed.
For the rest of the meeting, we're going to have the folks that brought prints talk about them to Howard. So we're going to go alphabetically by first name. So Adrian, you're first.
All right.
So why don't you grab your prints? Do you think an easel would be handy?
There's some right
Okay,
behind.
we're
There's those things back there.
Well, there's one out about here.
This jacket was yours too.
Well, thank you for the invitation. Really did. So, I've got a lot of prints in here.
Oh.
All right.
And now
Okay.
there's 10 commandments.
Two.
Now, but I won't show all of them. In fact, I'll show very few of them. I'm Adrian, by the way. I'm a Camera Club member that dates back to when they were still doing hand calligraphy on the name tag. So,
Now with the Ann Arbor Observer.
oh yeah, I've been with them a long time too. Yeah. So I actually knew of Howard before he knew me, and the reason why was because back in the 1980s, I was really getting into photography, and I went to the library, and one of my favorite books was this one, Late Motifs. You remember this one, don't you, Howard?
Oh, yeah.
And I absolutely loved it. The prints were fantastic. They had depth, and these were all photographs of English churches, some cathedrals in there. But what struck me was just the light that was in there and how fantastic the prints were. And I checked this book out so many times from the library and paid a whole lot of overdue fines that I finally figured out I probably would save money by buying the book, so I did. To me, it was, I knew this book before I knew Howard. And when I first came to the Camera Club a few years after I had been checking this book out and met Howard, I was
Well, I'll tell you, my very first thought was,
Disappointment.
my first thought actually was, well, this guy's kind of old. That was 1989, and my perspective on age has since changed from then. But the other thing was, I was just amazed that the guy who produced these prints was actually coming to the camera club. And my first thought was really, what could he learn from us? And that's when I realized what Howard was really doing was observing and encouraging people, and sometimes looking at details and making some comments to help us improve our photography, and just sharing his passion. But to me, it was really amazing when I got to know Howard better. And not only do I have the book, but Howard also gave me the prints that he used in the book, the printing of the book. And in this binder here are his handwritten comments about how they should be cropped and things like that. So I was going to try to put this out somewhere so people could leaf through it if you're interested in seeing that. Another thing was I started taking workshops that Howard had given, and that involves this one here. Another one of Howard's, let me see if I can grab this. Just hold that for a moment. I don't actually have the actual print of this, but this is a really high quality reproduction. And it's the Snake River at the Tetons.
Yeah.
And, you know, for as beautiful as this photograph is, you don't really know the magic that Howard, or I shouldn't even say magic, it's really the science that Howard used to create this.
I usually had a small piece of paper with an outline of the subject, and then I'd put the notes about how to print it. And this one was so complicated, if it had been any harder to print, I would never have printed it. But as it was, I had to put the edition at 250, and I had to have my wife help me to print it, because when I put a lot of extra time on the sky, there were some spots that got too dark. And oh, that's got the dodging and burning scheme on it. And up in the upper left corner, it's near the sun. How many times, as much time as the foliage. The foliage gets 4.1 seconds. The sky gets about 40 seconds.
Yeah, so I actually have the original negative that Howard used for this 8x10 negative with the Unsharp Mask. And of course, these are the notes about dodging and burning and what filtration you were using. And I kind of was thinking about an Ansel Adams quote. And Ansel Adams said that the negative is the score and the print is the performance. And I think the thing that Ansel Adams left out, especially with this one, is that when Howard was producing this with his wife Margaret, they both needed to do it. They would be waving their hands in various directions to dodge and burn. So I kind of think that they were both conductors. There is one other binder I was going to show you here. Oh yeah, thank you, Kellman. And Howard kind of gave away the what I was going to have as the surprise conclusion, but this involves the Yosemite workshop. So just play along with me here, like you don't remember what he said in his introduction there. But he did attend a workshop where he was doing Polaroid prints using a large format camera. And these were really beautiful. Again, I want to put this out so that you can see them. And they're a little hard to see because they're obviously as Polaroids. These are the originals, so they're fairly small compared to the prints that we're used to seeing. But the workshop instructor, I'll just read you the first paragraph here. He says, "Here at last are your Polaroid land prints." This letter is from January 25th, 1968. 1967 was when Howard took the workshop. "Here at last are your Polaroid land prints from the 1967 Yosemite workshop. I am sorry that they have been delayed in coming to you, but Polaroid wanted many people in their organization to see them. They expressed appreciation and interest in the quality of the work." And of course, you know that the instructor was Ansel Adams, and these are the original notes that Ansel Adams sent to Howard regarding all of the 17 Polaroid images in there. So I also just wanted to share that. And I think I've already taken up too much time here, but Howard, thank you for at least for me, 3.5 decades of inspiration and friendship and pizza.
Yeah, he brings, every 6 weeks, he brings pizza and beer.
Okay, Alice, you're next, followed by Dietmar.
No. I see some, it's on its side. I can see that.
Is it Switzerland or the Rockies?
Switzerland.
That's eternal. First of all, I want to repeat what Adrian said. The kindness is just amazing. That I remember 20 years ago when I came into the club, just kind of a beginner, and here he was, this famous person, workshop leader, and it didn't matter whether you were a beginner or what. I gotta go like that. So I want to thank you, Howard. And you're a real Renaissance man, and you're so kind, and we all just gained, and you could have just stuck with your professional group, but no, you were out showing us all what we could do and helping us and encouraging us, so thank you so much.
You're welcome.
After Dietmar is George.
This is the Cathedral. I don't know which one it is, but.
Lincoln,
Lincoln?
it's got the floor showing.
Okay,
The only time I could ever show the floor.
yeah. Well, anyway, I used to take pictures of insides of churches or cathedrals myself, but I used a 35mm camera with slide film and the results were not that spectacular very far. So I saw this picture and I thought I had to have it, so I bought it from Howard, and I like it. It's in our living room, and I think the quality is just outstanding.
Thank you.
By the way, we went to the exhibition in Mannheim, Germany, The Birth of Photography, and we saw how it's printed there. And it was a fantastic exhibition, very historic prints as well as some from the 20th century as well.
Mhm.
Okay, that concludes my remarks.
I don't see George here, so Greg, you're next, followed by Keith.
Howard mentioned the window on Steve knows. This is the photograph. And this photograph is outside my bedroom. I look at it every morning as I go by. It's a perfect print. It has every shade, pure black, pure white, and wonderful middle tone. But I want you to notice the two shadows. And the window and the shadow are perfect. I've learned many things from Howard, but I look at this photograph and I think of patience in photography. This photograph teaches me patience.
Hi, Howard.
Hi.
Now, I was lucky enough when Howard was downsizing, he was giving away a lot of prints, and I got about a dozen of them. I brought 3 in here to show. This one is one of the sand dunes ones, probably from one of his workshops. It inspired me I went there many times, and I just loved the sand dunes, and partially because of Howard. And I did take one of his workshops on basic printing, and one of the best things he taught us was what a good print was. You know, you're not going to make a good print if you don't know what a good print is. And he showed us a lot of from his collection, and it was very valuable to me at the time. Well, this is from one of the Greek islands, in the corners of buildings. And a few years back, we did, with Jerry Abrams, we did a trip to the Greek islands. And we were all looking for that staircase that, we didn't find it, but
Yeah, we never
Terry gave the advice, but we should find your own staircase. You know? But just seeing the designs of buildings and stuff, to this day, when I, in a good architectural spot, look for pieces of buildings just like this. Yeah. Another thing that inspired me was the bristlecone pine detail. When I've been in Colorado, up in the high country, and I see bristlecone pines, I'm always looking for pictures like this. The other thing, for me, week after every meeting, Howard would bring in pictures of his to see. So we got to see a lot of great pictures over the years. Thank you, Howard.
Thank you.
And then Sue.
We seem to be showing you first.
Oh.
Howard gave this one to Mary and I when he was in his cleaning out phase. Howard has put a description on the back of this photograph.
And according to Howard's description, the title of this is Wetterhorn, Eiger, and Lund. From the main peaks from left to right across the photograph. It was taken in Switzerland near the villages of Grindelwald and Lauterbrunn. And I hope the German speakers in the room will be patient with my German accent. Howard dates this photo to 2001. As probably all of you know, he traveled extensively around the world for many years, seeking subjects for his photographs, until about 2005. This particular image then, I'm not speaking loud enough, was taken toward the end of that period of wide-ranging travel. Now, if you look closely at the photograph, there's a little building down here, which looks to me like the upper terminus of a ski lift. Now, I don't know where Howard was standing when he took this shot, but he must have been someplace pretty high, because he's looking down on the top end of a ski lift. So I have wondered, how did Howard get to wherever it was he took the photograph, especially with one of those big cameras?
Well, you take 4 consecutive cable cars from the valley, and you've already seen a television camera view of what's going on. So you choose a day when the valley's full of clouds and take the 4 cable cars. That building is quite large. That's where you change from the 3rd to the 4th cable car. And I was with Dick one time up there and Dick kicked himself because he thought, well, I'll do another picture first, and then he was going to do this one, and of course it wasn't there when he wanted it. And so the moral of the story is, grab them while you can.
Well, I imagined that you were taking one of those big, large format cameras up on a ski lift with you.
Well, not very large, 5 by 7.
Oh, 5 by 7. Well, I brought a picture of Howard with one of his cameras, just to give you an idea of what he might have been struggling with on the ski lift.
That's an 8 by 10.
Maybe not this one, huh?
That's an 8 by 10 camera. But it looks big because it's closer to the person who took this picture than I was. I didn't bring it because my forehead was all creased with wrinkles, and I didn't want you to see that.
Anyway, thank you, Howard.
You're welcome.
After Sue is Rosie.
Oh. These hands belong to Clyde Corello, who made instruments. And he reconditioned an 18th and 19th century cello, and we bought it for our daughter for about $1,000. She had it appraised recently for, I think it was $10,000.
I had seen this picture at the art fair, and I fell in love with it. And when I got the opportunity for Howard to give this to me, I was just thrilled. On the back of it, he has written out a little history here. This was 1966. In 1966, we bought for our daughter Susan an old Austrian cello Clyde had restored. It had remarkable tone quality, and Susan approached it very seriously. When she was in the 8th grade, she played in the Michigan Youth Symphony and also played the Chanson cello concerto with piano accompaniment. She gave it up in the 9th grade, but recently began taking lessons at the Peabody Institute in Baltimore after a 40-year hiatus. This was in 2011 when he wrote this. And on the back are some pictures of Corello working in his studio. He was quite well known. Thank you, Howard.
Thank you.
So I was fortunate enough to take a couple of classes that he offered in his home and purchased this image, which I fell in love with. I think, and please correct me, that was an English church series.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you said you had to expose this for like an inordinate amount of time, like minutes, 45 or long.
Well, not that long, but quite a bit.
Yeah, you basically set it up and sort of left because it was in a very dark nave. I just loved the textures in it and thought it was just fantastic. I also wanted to thank you once again. He found out that my family and I were going to take a rafting trip in the Grand Canyon, and he and Margaret invited my husband and I over to show a slideshow, because that was back when you had guided, you know, a famous guide, I believe.
Yeah, we went with Georgie White.
Yeah, and shared his adventures with that and things to do. So, thank you for everything.
You're welcome.
Is Terry here? Terry's next.
Yeah, I'm
Terry
here.
Abrams. Okay.
I didn't bring a print.
That's
So
okay.
I'll show Howard my notes.
Yeah.
I better not show them to him. So I came to Ann Arbor in 1988. I've been living overseas. I lived in Europe for 13 years, doing photography and teaching photography. And so I came to Ann Arbor, and I thought, well, there must be some photography in Ann Arbor. So I went to a camera store, and I said, well, you know, what's the scene in Ann Arbor for photography? And they said, well, you have to get with Howard Bond. And I said, Howard who? Because I wasn't familiar with his work because I've been gone for so long. And so out of the blue, I contacted Howard. I don't remember if I texted or emailed you.
I didn't.
Oh, we didn't have email back then. So I don't know. I must have rode my horse over. And I went over and contacted Howard. He didn't know who I was from Adam. And he said, well, it's very nice to talk to you. Let's get together. And so we did. And you know, that just struck me about Howard. That you know, his kindness, his willingness to help, his generosity. You know, just struck me right off the bat. And then Howard said, after we met, he said, well, why don't you attend one of my workshops? And I was like, great. So he told me he was having a printing workshop, and he said, just come on in. So I went to the workshop, and I don't know if you saw the photograph of his darkroom, but it was the weirdest darkroom I'd ever seen. He had this spider web of strings across the ceiling, connected to individual light bulbs in various places. And when he wanted to look at different things in the dark room, he would just reach up and start pulling the strings and turn the lights on and off. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
Wow. And I thought, and I was thinking, well, I'm going to be setting up a dark room now that I'm here. And I was trying to figure out, now how would I string up, you know, I couldn't figure it out. And let me see. Oh, and the other thing about the dark room was that I don't remember how many people were in the group, maybe 8 people or something like that.
I had a maximum of 11.
Yeah. So they were all in the dark room at the same time. You know, it was kind of, you know, it wasn't a small dark room, but it seemed to me like a lot of people to have in the dark room at once. He had a custom sink that was the longest darkroom sink I'd ever seen, and it had some interesting features to it, interesting plumbing. I don't know if you remember the plumbing in your sink, but
Oh, yeah.
yeah, and I don't think it was certified by the city inspector. And he had a print viewing light right above the sink with the running water, which is kind of, so you could put the prints up right there, and so that was perfect. So I was getting all these ideas for my darkroom. But then the thing that really got me was he didn't have a timer in the darkroom. So, he didn't have a timer for the chemicals or for I don't think he had one on the enlarger either, but he had a metronome. And he would just count with the metronome. And I thought that was like so weird. Like for me, I wouldn't be able to remember, like what number I was on, and count the seconds. So, but it did inspire me. And when I finally built my own darkroom, a lot of the ideas were based on Howard's, except for the metronome became a stereo system with the Grateful Dead playing music. So thank you, Howard. Thank you for the inspiration, your generosity, and your kindness.
Thank you.
This is the print I brought. It's of the Huron River.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you remember that day?
Yeah, that's one of my favorites.
Is it? I was a student photographer at Washtenaw Community College, walking around the Huron River, Delhi Rapids, and I saw this guy with this camera, 11 by 14.
Can't see it.
11 by 14.
That's
The
patience.
biggest camera I had ever seen in my life. I was carrying around a little 35 millimeter Pentax. Okay, I said, I gotta meet this guy. So I go up and I introduce myself. He tells me he's Howard Bond and he's a photographer. Really. So I became fascinated with this, and I just kept talking to him. And he says, well, Tim, I got nothing else to do. Let's go over to my house and I'll show you my darkroom. Terry, here's a picture of the darkroom. This was taken years later, but this is in Howard's basement. There's all the strings. I do have a picture of his sink. I didn't bring it, but sorry. But this is where Howard spent most of his life. Okay. Years go by, Howard moves out of his house, he's got a new place, and he immediately finds something to photograph. But he's given up his camera. He asked me if he could use mine. I've got a little digital pocket camera. Okay, so one day Howard and I went out and we photographed the side of Glacier Hills.
Look at that tiny thing.
Allegedly, it's his first digital image. Okay. So, well, this is him taking his first digital image. Okay. We later worked together to produce this. Okay. Howard's got a bigger version. I lost mine. I don't know where it is. So I printed a smaller one. But this is that window. Something Howard saw immediately. And this is what he sees in his mind. Okay? After he's photographed it, he starts imagining the tones and what needs to be black and what needs to be white. And he and I work on this together. He on his computer, me on mine. And we come up with this. And I think this is my favorite Howard Bond photograph. I really do. I mean, that's what he sees.
What's your style, too?
Well, yeah. Yeah, he's had quite an influence. This, by the way, allegedly is Howard's first photograph.
Well, the first camera.
Okay. You want to talk about it?
It might, well, my aunt gave me a non-adjustable little camera when I was in the 8th grade, and I put 3 or 4 rolls of film through it, and that's from one of those. And I like it, and so I printed it later when I knew how to print. And that was bought by a museum director, and that really made me think more of it.
So the camera you used.
Oh, this is yours.
No, this, Adrian brought it in.
This was,
You gave it to
yeah,
Adrian.
this was my first camera.
That's not a brownie, is it?
No.
It's a real camera.
That's a real camera. It's a roll.
A real camera.
Roll. Yeah, I don't know.
Rolls camera, not rolls the car.
And this is a photograph Howard shared with me of he and some of his buddies out on a photo expedition where one guy puts his tripod up and everybody puts their camera on it, takes pictures of it.
We only had to take one tripod overseas because we could take turns using it.
Well, Howard's had a tremendous influence in my style and my career. He was the first fine art photographer. I come from a family of photographers. My uncle was a wedding photographer, a commercial photographer. But Howard was the first one I met that made a living through his art. And I've tried to emulate his style. It's been a lot of fun knowing Howard, and thank you so much. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Okay. That's all. We're going to get up and stroll around with the photographs again. Before anybody leaves, we'd like to get a group shot, okay? Yeah, with the masks and everything. What? Yes.
So no one else is showing this?
I think that was it.
Can I, for just a second?
Yeah.
There's one print over here. Let me tell you a story about this. Remember this? You know what I'm going to tell him? All right. So Howard and I were at the Grand Canyon. And we saw this scene, oh my God, we were hot to take this picture, so we both did. So, I mean, the contrast, it was just absolutely impossible to print. And this is before precision dodging burning masks, okay? So basically we're using a card that you cut out, you know, a triangle like that, and you try to, well anyway, there I was, and I spent a whole box of film, paper, trying to do this print. And I mean, it was so frustrating, because you got to get it the right height, and you would get, it was almost impossible not to get a fake line around here. So anyway, after this whole box of paper, I finally decided to go over to Howard. So I said, Howard, and I brought my negative because I wasn't really sure if he, you know, if it turned out or whatever. And so he says, well, I said, would you give it a try? So he puts it in his enlarger. And I'll tell you, it was a real humbling experience because in his first try, he had one better, much better than any of the ones that I had done. You may not realize it, but this guy is one of them. I mean, he is an absolute master in the darkroom. I mean, a printer, unbelievable. I mean, seriously. And I've known a few printers, and this guy is really, really good. Anyway.
So what Dick didn't know was I had already printed my negative, which was practically identical to his. And so my first try with his negative naturally was very close. So he thought I was a wizard printer.
He is.
You folks want to try to get a group shot? What do you think?